At approximately 4:20 p.m. on November 7, 2015, an ambulance was on its way to a hospital in Hereford, England, when it was flagged down by a trio of people struggling down the road. One of these people was an older man, clearly struggling to stand. He was being supported by a younger man and a woman who had happened upon the two men near the Hereford bus station as they struggled to walk towards the hospital and offered to help. The older man was loaded into the ambulance to be taken the rest of the way to the hospital. The paramedics believed that in addition to his obvious physical frailty, the man was suffering from some sort of dementia. He seemed to be smiling and crying simultaneously, and was seemingly unaware of his surroundings. He could not answer the basic questions asked of him, although he did eventually provide the first name Roger. The man who had been bringing him to the hospital also did not provide much information about himself. He refused to give his name and contact information because he claimed to be working at a nearby base of the Special Air Service, or SAS, an elite special forces unit of the British Army. He was dressed in what appeared to be some sort of military uniform and spoke with an American accent. He told officials that he had found the elderly man face down in a country lane near Credenhill, a village just outside of town. He left the hospital shortly after arriving there. The older man was still disoriented and could not provide any information about who he was or how he got to the area. He did eventually provide the full name of Roger Curry, but it was unclear if he meant that it was his name or the name of someone he knew. He had no form of identification on him, or anything else that could help police determine his identity. He was dressed in all new clothes from a British department store, but police believed he was originally from North America. The man was very soft-spoken and difficult to understand when he was able to speak, but it was originally believed that he was Canadian based on his accent. A linguistics expert was eventually brought in to evaluate his accent, and they believed the man to be from the United States. The West Mercia police initially assumed that the man, who may or may not have been named Roger, would be identified quickly when his worried family reported him missing. That report never came. Police looked into missing persons reports from all over the UK, as well as in Canada and the United States. They checked CCTV footage from the area, but found nothing to help their investigation. They took the man's fingerprints and DNA, but found no matches in any database. With no one looking for a man who clearly required close supervision, doctors and police began to fear that he had been intentionally abandoned by his family. Authorities then appealed to the public to help identify the man, who would eventually become widely known as the Credenhill Man because of the location where he was allegedly found. The story was featured on local television and in newspapers, and eventually his story spread widely through social media. When none of these efforts resulted in an identification, the Credenhill Man was moved to Credenhill Court, a local care home that specializes in caring for dementia patients. He lived a peaceful life there, and the staff adored him. Their only complaint about him was that he would take more than his share of chocolate muffins. In 2016, still with no idea who the Credenhill Man was, authorities decided to launch another media campaign. The story was covered by the BBC and Sky News, reaching more people and garnering much more interest from the public. After seeing the story on the news, Rebecca Reese, the woman who had helped get the man to the hospital, came forward. Police briefly investigated her, thinking perhaps the Credenhill Man might have been Rebecca's husband, but she was soon cleared of suspicion. The case of the Credenhill Man became a popular mystery online, with amateur sleuths from all around the world discussing it through social media. One such sleuth posted on the BBC West Midlands Facebook page with an image from a 1958 high school yearbook. The yearbook was from Edmonds High School, just outside of Seattle, Washington, and the image was of 18-year-old Earl Roger Curry, who looked similar to the Credenhill Man and would be approximately the same age as he was believed to be. A reporter named Dara McIntyre was working on a documentary about missing people when he happened upon the case of the Credenhill Man and had the chance to meet him. He decided to travel to Washington State to follow up on the lead that had been posted on Facebook and would ultimately confirm the identity of the Credenhill Man. After graduating high school, Earl Roger Curry, who went by his middle name, served in the United States Air Force. He married a woman named Mary Jo, and the couple had 2 children. After leaving the Air Force, he worked as a nurse for Kaiser Permanente. He and his family lived in Whittier, California, a suburb of Los Angeles. Dara McIntyre traveled to Whittier and was able to speak to some of Roger Curry's neighbors. When they were shown pictures of the Credenhill man, they confirmed that he was their former neighbor. Roger and Mary Jo no longer lived in the home because it had been badly damaged by a fire in 2014 and deemed uninhabitable by the city. However, in August of 2015, a neighbor had seen then 75-year-old Roger wandering around behind the chain-link fence that had been constructed around his property. There was a padlock securing the entrance to the fence, so the neighbor climbed over the fence to check on Roger. Roger's wife, Mary Jo, was also on the property, sleeping on an air mattress on the porch of the burnt-out home. The temperature that day was almost 90 degrees Fahrenheit. The couple did have a cooler with water and some food, but they were hardly strong enough to be living outdoors in such heat. Mary Jo had Parkinson's disease. Roger had Alzheimer's disease and could not care for himself. When police arrived on the scene, he was confused and dehydrated. Police would eventually discover that the food in the cooler was being brought to the Currys by their son, Kevin. The key to the padlock on the fence was found on his keychain, which would seem to imply that he had been the one who had locked his parents behind the fence, preventing them from leaving. However, Mary Jo told the police that it had been her idea for her and her husband to live behind what was left of their home, and no charges were ever filed against Kevin in relation to the matter. Kevin Curry had been charged with a number of criminal offenses, ranging from assault to fraud to burglary in his past, and had spent time in prison. He had been caring for his parents in 2015, but they had previously been estranged. In 2000, Roger Curry was granted a restraining order against his son after Kevin tried to strangle him, pushed him against a wall, and made several threats against him. According to neighbors, he still did not treat his parents well after he came back into their lives, as they could routinely hear him yelling and making loud noises in his parents' home. The circumstances of how Roger Curry arrived in the United Kingdom did not begin becoming clear to the police until March of 2016, when they finally heard from the mystery man who had been trying to walk Roger to the hospital in Hereford. 50-year-old Simon Hayes called in to identify himself and provided an account very similar to the one he had given to the paramedics who brought Roger to the hospital in 2015. Simon claimed that he had been a member of the Special Boat Service of the Royal Navy, attending a course at the SAS base in Hereford, when he and a Canadian Army serviceman found Roger face down in a country road. He told authorities that he was now living in Los Angeles, but was currently in the UK visiting family. After Simon provided a formal statement, authorities followed up on his account and went to speak with his father, Ken, in April of 2016. Ken informed them that his son was not visiting, he was living with him. He had previously lived in Los Angeles, but had been deported back to the UK in 2013. He also told them that Simon knew both Kevin and Roger Curry. Simon Hayes had moved to Los Angeles in 2003 to begin an American branch of his motorsport coaching business. He met Kevin Curry through a mutual friend, and the two men bonded over a shared interest in Area 51. They became close friends, and Simon spent the holidays with the Currys in 2010, seeing firsthand the effects Alzheimer's was already having on Kevin's father, Roger. Simon was deported in January of 2013, following an arrest for drunk driving. According to Simon, he was deported because his cellmate started a fight with him, and he was blamed for it. According to U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, he was deported because he had been in the country for 6 years on a 90-day visa waiver program. Upon his return to the United Kingdom, Simon immediately began applying for a visa to return to the United States. He supported his applications with a fraudulent reference he claimed to be from a British major general that detailed a glorious military career that he did not ever have. All of his applications were denied. Simon and Kevin did remain in contact after Simon left the United States. Confronted by authorities with the fact that he knew the Curry family, Simon changed his story. He now admitted that his friend Kevin had called him to tell him that his family was about to take a European vacation, and that he wanted to stop in the UK to see him. Prior to his trip, Kevin said that he would be putting his parents in a nursing home for the time he would be out of the country. Simon claims that he was therefore surprised to see Mary Jo and Roger, who was so weak that he had to be brought out in a wheelchair, when he met the family at Gatwick Airport. Simon denied that there was ever any plan to abandon Roger. Instead, Kevin asked Simon to help him get his father admitted to a hospital because he was sick. Simon agreed, and Kevin rented a car for him to use for the task. Prior to their departure, Kevin had borrowed Simon's credit card to do some shopping, which may have been when he purchased the new British clothes Roger was found wearing. Simon and Roger then drove 150 miles to Hereford, where Simon put on a fake uniform and American accent. There are several details about Simon's story and the actual events that call his claims of innocence into question. There were 2 hospitals within 6 miles of the hotel where the Currys were staying. Instead of simply bringing Roger to one of these hospitals, Simon drove 150 miles, presumably passing more hospitals along the way, to bring him to the hospital in Hereford. This decision does not make it appear as though his main motivation was Roger's health, nor does the fact that he made the frail older man, who could barely stand, try to walk to the hospital from the bus station. Simon was provided with a vehicle and did drive to the area, but for some reason would not drive all the way to the hospital to drop off Roger, instead trying to get him to attempt to make the last part of the unnecessarily long trip on foot. Simon also lied both about who he was and how he came to be with Roger in Hereford. While the fake persona of an American soldier and the made-up story about training at the SAS base were most likely some sort of fantasy of Simon's, his dishonesty with the hospital staff, and later the police, kept them from identifying Roger for months, when he could have provided them with that information from the start. In a 2019 interview, Roger would explain his deception by essentially admitting that the plan was to abandon Roger, but just temporarily. He says that he did not want anyone to be able to identify Roger because he wanted the rest of the Curry family to have a break from caring for him for at least a week. If the hospital could not identify Roger, they could not locate his family, and they could enjoy their vacation while Roger was being cared for at the hospital. After leaving Roger in Hereford, Simon met back up with the rest of the Curry family and accompanied them on the next leg of their trip in Denmark. Kevin Curry has not spoken publicly very much about the case, but he has said that he did not abandon his father in a foreign country to place the burden and cost of his care on the British government, as it appears. He claims that he did not abandon his father. He just asked a friend to take him to the hospital when he became ill after arriving in the UK. There are several glaring problems with this account, however. When Kevin purchased the airline tickets for the family trip, he bought round-trip tickets for everyone in the family, except for Roger, indicating that he knew in advance that Roger would not be returning to the US with them. The most obvious reason Kevin looks suspicious is that he never returned to the UK to get his father out of the hospital before returning home, never reported him missing, and never showed any interest in finding him after he sent him off with Simon. Even if he did not plan to abandon his father, it could be argued that this lack of action amounts to abandonment. Kevin also lied to his extended family about where Roger was during the time he spent in the UK. According to Kevin's uncle, Tim Otters, Kevin claimed that Roger was in a nursing home in Arizona and doing very well there. Police in England had researched people with the name of Roger Curry and families with that surname as a part of their investigation, and had been given Kevin Curry's contact information by authorities in the United States in March of 2016. When they called his phone number, the person who answered denied knowing a Roger Curry. There is, of course, the possibility that the police had the wrong number, or someone else answered Kevin's phone. However, shortly after police made this call, Kevin Curry made a call to Simon Hayes. Simon would later say that during this conversation, Kevin asked him not to come forward with his story about what had happened with his father, because it would upset his mother. He also told him that Roger would become homeless if he was returned to the United States. There are, of course, enormous financial and emotional burdens placed on family members who are taking care of elderly dementia patients. However, thousands of families cope with these stresses without dumping their relative in a foreign country so that they can receive free care. Furthermore, all of the financial resources available to Roger do not appear to have been used for his benefit. Roger had Social Security benefits, a pension, and veterans benefits that provided him with a modest monthly income of $1,500. It is unclear what happened to these payments during the 8 months Roger was in the UK. Since he was never reported missing, the issuing agencies would not have had a reason to stop making payments. While Roger and Mary Jo's house was essentially destroyed in the 2014 fire, they still owned the property in an upper-middle-class neighborhood in a county famous for its expensive real estate. However, the property was not sold to help finance the care Roger and Mary Jo both needed. The Currys may have had limited resources, but they still had some that could have been utilized. In 2019, Simon Hayes was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison for his role in Roger's case. His lies, according to Simon Davis, the barrister who prosecuted him, resulted in an enormous waste of effort by the police and the fraudulent use of public funds. Roger's care during his time in the UK cost the National Health Service approximately £20,000. The defendant was part of a plan to bring Roger from the US and dump him in Hereford, abandoning him so that he could receive care from local healthcare providers. It was clearly planned, Davis told the court. Court documents in both California and the UK allege that Kevin Curry was under investigation for fraud and elder abuse, but neither the Los Angeles Police Department nor the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Office opened a formal investigation into the case, and no charges have ever been filed against Kevin Curry. While he had the most to gain from the alleged plot, only his accomplice is facing legal consequences from it. Following his identification, Roger Curry was repatriated to the United States in July of 2016. Upon his arrival, Los Angeles County officials filed an application to have a conservator appointed to handle Roger's care and affairs. No one in his family is prepared to accept responsibility for him, the application claimed. His own wife and son abused him when they took him overseas, only to abandon him there. Kevin and Mary Jo Curry did appear at some of the hearings relating to the conservatorship, but never formally contested it. Roger was ultimately placed under the care of a conservator, who arranged for his benefits to be used to get him treatment in a residential facility. Roger spent time in a few nursing homes before settling into one in Long Beach, California. Upon his arrival, he was still able to at least somewhat participate in activities like bingo, and seemed happy. However, by 2019, his health had deteriorated to the point where he was almost completely bedridden, according to reports filed by his conservator. His caretaker said that he was still soft-spoken and respectful, even in his weakened state. Unfortunately, the solving of the Credenhill man case did not result in a happy ending. Roger Curry's identification did not result in a happy reunion with his family. Neither Kevin nor Mary Jo Curry has seen or visited Roger since his return to the United States.